If there's one thing we know, Jason, it's that the markets have a habit of humiliating all of us. I would say let's not get arrogant and become cowboys and we get cocky on the market right now. Markets are probabilistic and chaotic. Nobody knows where the market's going.
For me, there are so many things lining up to say that this market, or all these markets, will break to all-time highs. We are in this commodity boom stage, this huge infrastructure spending, and we're going into this era of very easy money. Now, this is not the 4-year cycle, the halving cycle that everyone likes to refer to, saying that when Bitcoin hits the halving, that it must go to a new all-time high. I don't think that's right. I think the collapse cycle that Bob is talking about, I think that comes after this one here, which also lines up with the real estate cycle.
I would argue that, personally, I don't think there was any connection or correlation at all. I think news media wants to draw these connections between news.
For sure.
All right, guys, hello and welcome. We have a very special guest on our YouTube channel. Jason Pizzino is with us, and you may recall I had a chat with Jason some months ago. He's here with us again, and he's got some very interesting charts to share with you. In fact, the charts, I think he's going to talk about stock markets and also Bitcoin. Should be quite interesting. And we're going to dig into the charts in just a few moments. All right, guys, join us. Hey guys, welcome back. Before we talk about Bitcoin, I just want to quickly mention our sponsor for this video, Pepperstone. Pepperstone was voted Best MT4 Broker by the Good Money Guide in 2023 and the TradingView Broker of the Year in 2022. Pepperstone was also awarded in 2023 the Day Trading Broker of the Year by daytrading.com. Now, these awards are great, but as you know, what traders also want from a good broker are tight spreads, fast and reliable execution with great customer service. So what if I told you that Pepperstone offers you all of that? For example, on the euro dollar, their spreads are as low as 0.7 pips. And on my favorite market, the S&P, the spread is only 0.4 points. As for execution speed, the average is 30 milliseconds, which is remarkably fast, but can depend on the market you're trading. If you use TradingView, that's great because you can also connect that to your Pepperstone account and trade through that. By the way, as you already know, trading carries significant risks, so please trade responsibly. If you want to withdraw your money, no problem. Pepperstone allows you to withdraw any funds into your bank by the next day or back to your card in 3 to 5 working days. Did I also mention that Pepperstone was voted #1 for overall client satisfaction, value for money, charting, and trade execution? To open an account, it's very simple. Go to the link in the description, apply for an account, and check out this award-winning trading platform for yourself. Remember that any money we get from sponsors is given to charity, such as rescuing abandoned animals, like the dog I mentioned in the previous video. All right, guys, let's go back to the video and talk about Bitcoin. Thanks very much, Jason, for joining us. I believe you have some interesting charts you want to share on stock markets and Bitcoin, which is quite ambitious because usually we do them separately. But I think you said something like there's some connection obviously between the two, which I agree. By the way, how are you, by the way? Where are you at the moment?
Well, thanks again for having me on the channel. Last time we met, I was in Bali, and now I'm back home in Australia. So going through the summer here, I missed the winter, now through the summer. So yeah, a lot going on at this stage.
You're in Melbourne, right?
Gold Coast. I live on the Gold Coast. That's usually the face I get from people. They're like, Melbourne or Sydney? Gold Coast?
Yeah.
They're like, what? It's surf city. Lots of beaches, lots of surf.
Right. Yeah. So down under, as they say. So what is the perspective you have on the charts right now? By the way, has anything happened so far on the markets or Bitcoin surprised you in the last few weeks and months?
Few weeks, not so much. It's only with the stock markets of how explosive the move was out of the October low. But yeah, for Bitcoin, it had a 7-month period there where it was building up in what we now know as a reaccumulation through that price bracket of 25K to 32K. And I mean, when that thing goes, it's just going to go. So there was a lot of talk about it potentially being a distribution. So, like a Wyckoff distribution and the market breaking down. But it did the opposite that many were looking at. And, I'll go through some of the charts and have a look at that. By the way, Jason,
before you continue, I find it really rich. I find it really rich and humorous, amusing, that just a few months ago, the same people who are mocking Bob right now on my, there's some.
I did see a bit of that,
Yeah, there's some people on my comments section saying, "Oh, Bob is wrong now. Bitcoin is going to go towards all-time highs." Really? Because these same nincompoops, they were calling for Bitcoin to go to 10K. These comments that I'm getting on YouTube, a lot of these people were extremely bearish just a few months ago. When I was bullish calling for 40K, these same comments, people on social media, they were calling for a crash on Bitcoin And they were mocking me for being bullish. Now that Bitcoin has rallied, by the way, I saw this coming, by the way. I saw this exact situation coming. I said, once Bitcoin rallies to higher targets, the episteme, the mode of thinking of people will change.
Yep.
That's exactly what's happened. These ignoramuses on social media just suddenly now switched on their over bullish brains, and now they have the audacity to criticize Bob Prechter, who's by far one of the most respected analysts out there, published several best-selling books on socioeconomics. So I think maybe those people who are criticizing Bob should take a step back and have some humility, because if there's one thing we know, Jason, it's that the markets have a habit of humiliating all of us. I would say let's not get arrogant and become cowboys and we get cocky on the market right now, because we should always respect the fact that markets are probabilistic and chaotic. Nobody knows where the market's going. We can analyze the market. We don't know for certain where it's going. All right, I've had my rant, Jason, but please go ahead.
That's all right. It's a good reminder to remain humble about the markets as I bring up the charts here and have a look through the stock markets before I get into Bitcoin, just to bring it, I guess, full circle to understand some of the analysis that I've come to. For the S&P 500, last time you and I talked, I believe it was when I was in Bali, which must have been June, July, and the market was climbing up here. So we've had a correction since that point. So we're up around here and we had a nice correction. And from that point, the S&P has basically recovered almost all of the gains. So yeah, if you guys were wanting a little bit more info on this, we spoke about this on my channel just earlier with Alessio, just looking at the potentials of the confirmation needed. But just in terms of the S&P 500, you can see my comments down here. And we did have a little discussion about that as well, just looking at the wording here, where there is no 100% guarantees, but I'm using this particular wording for my own levels, that if they were to break, something is completely wrong with the market. And the reason I've got here won't be broken. So it's very, it's like 100% guarantee it won't be broken. Nothing like that happens. But in terms of this low here, this was the worst low, the worst feeling low for the markets. S&P, NASDAQ, Dow Jones, Bitcoin. March of 2023 was the banking crisis. And so I work a lot on market sentiment as you do yourself, looking at different readings. So for that March low, if that was to break, something worse than a banking crisis would have to occur. The same sort of deal here back at this low. This for me is the cycle low now, October 2022 for the stock markets. And at that time, I was looking at this particular region being a accumulation zone, waiting for a breakout. And this was a very long accumulation, which is why I think that we have a lot further to go. That's just one reason. These lows I don't expect to be broken because of, I guess we can just keep it simple, something within Gann analysis. When we get a higher low on a macro scale, with the higher low being this one here, having more extreme sentiment, and the price didn't go lower, that is one of the easiest signals that the market can give us to tell us that this is a macro bull market. So from that point, the market's basically pumped from there. But we had a lot of different, bad news stories coming out through April and May. Some of us may remember the US debt ceiling crisis. It basically didn't do anything to the chart. We got into August and we had more interest rate rises. We had this October low, which I don't even remember what the bad news was at the October low. Something else happened to do with interest rates or whatever.
The thing is, Jason, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
go on.
The news is always bad near the lows. That's one thing I've always learned. And this is why paying attention to news media, financial news media, is worthless.
Yeah, for sure. And that's exactly how I used it on this one here, because of that how bad the news was. And it was even worse than the low. No one, I don't really remember what the October 2022 low was about, but I definitely remember why we had a March 2023 low. It was a banking crisis. And so when you get that same structure, a higher price low on worse news, so worse market sentiment than the cycle low or a major low, it's basically a rule in my books that it's a good time to buy. And so we were buying up Bitcoin at that time. It was $19,500, $20,000. And it was just a real, for me, because I've seen it multiple times, it was very hard to understand the first couple of times. But because I've seen it a few times, it just seemed like a sitter.
In the spring, you're talking about March. You're talking about
March 2023. So
Yeah.
for me, that's autumn. For you guys, it's spring.
Yeah, I would agree with you because that was also the time I was bullish on both stock markets and also Bitcoin as well. I thought basically you're absolutely right. I said as long as the stock market remains above 3,700, we're still going higher. It's interesting. So you and I were on the same wavelength at the time. Go ahead.
Dead on. It was 3,800 points there.
Yeah.
So we've got our 50% level as well from the all-time high to the cycle low. The October low that we just had in 2023 came back and basically sat dead on that level of this bear market range and then quickly sprung away from that level. So I've got a few markers in the sand now why this would be a very significant low and probably won't be broken. It's a higher low than March. It was on the 50% level. We've had a very, very strong move out of that low. I look at time counts and overbalance in price. So we've got a lot bigger of a move than anything we saw prior. And essentially, there is a lot telling me that this is likely the low and the market just needs to digest this pretty significant move to the upside. So that's the S&P 500. And the rest of these markets follow pretty closely. You got the NASDAQ, which is pretty similar. It's now only less than 6% away from highs. It has broken past the July top. The tech sector, that just means the tech sector is stronger. And of course, there is a lot of tech in the S&P 500. About 30% of it moves on that.
Back in February of this year, I was having a chat with Charlie Burton, trader Charlie Burton, and I mentioned some statistical data that said that the NASDAQ and the tech sector are going to be very strong this year, especially up to July. And that's exactly what happened. So do you see more, do you see more upside in these tech sector, NASDAQ, S&P? But you're coming to that, presumably.
Definitely, yeah. In the longer term, for sure. I think it needs some time to digest the move, and that's essentially what's going on now. We've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight weeks up, higher highs, higher lows. And that's a pretty strong sign. It's also broken the top. For me, any sort of correction back to 15,100 is healthy. It can come back and test somewhere around these previous highs or even just get back to these lows. That would still be okay, but I don't know if that's going to happen. I really just look for 50% levels. And so far, the NASDAQ has been extremely strong.
So just to be clear, is it your view that the NASDAQ is going to have a 50% retracement from where, is that your view, that's going to be having a pullback of 50%? Am I right?
Not necessarily. Where I look for the 50% are to give me signs of strength and weakness. If it comes back to 50% and finds support, perfect. That's just a balanced market doing balanced things. It's digesting the move and potentially getting ready to move again. Like you saw with the S&P 500, the market loves these 50% levels. It comes in, it just sits at them, it tests them. Look at that. You can see it tested here on the Russian war news. Bounce and then came back down, and it basically did that before the 50% low was actually in, which is a bit tinfoil hat, but we'll leave that for another video.
By the way, I'm glad you mentioned the Russian war, because the day that Russia invaded Ukraine was the day that the market started rallying higher. I think that was the low of the spring of 2022. Yeah, about there. Yeah, and people this is why people just don't get it. They think the news and market events are correlated positively, like they think news drives market events.
And that reminded me of potentially why we had this October drop, and we had the Palestinian-Israeli war start on their weekend of the holy weekend of Israel, and the market dropped off for those couple of weeks there. But I think markets eventually realized that as sick and as sad as it sounds, war's good for the market. So that may have also started to price in there.
I would argue that personally, I don't think there was any connection or correlation at all. I made a video about this, Jason. I don't know if you saw it, but I think news media wants to draw these connections between.
Oh, for sure, for sure, it happened.
I don't think there is any connection at all.
Yeah, it happened at that time, and that's what people, nailed it down to. But if there's no connection, there's no connection. Like you and I, we'll just follow the chart and see what happens.
Exactly.
From that point.
Exactly.
Yeah. So S&P 500, I think, is just slightly lagging on the NASDAQ, which is the strongest here. It's the leader. It's got the tech stocks. And then if we go over to our favorite, you and my favorite, the Dow Jones.
Okay.
The Dow Jones is...
Actually, it's not one of my favorites. I don't like the Dow. No? I prefer the S&P.
Oh.
But go ahead. Yeah. No, I'm glad you mentioned the Dow because I like to see your view on it. Go ahead. Yeah.
The Dow has just broken that July top and closed very strongly above it. It is 2% away from a new all-time high. It's also done a very similar pattern. You've got your October low of 2022, which is the cycle low. You have your March higher low, which happened on the banking crisis, the extreme news that everyone was so bearish. 95% of people were extremely bearish at that low. And now we just had the October low at another higher low. And the market has now broken past all these tops. It has broken past any of the tops back here, and the only top left is the all-time high. Doesn't mean I'm expecting it just to go up and up forever. Maybe we get a test and a little pause here, and then we start to digest the move before we go again. You and I understand that, but for me, there are so many things lining up to say that this market, or all these markets, will break to all-time highs, whether it happens late December or first half of 2024. I think there is a strong case to say that these stock markets in the US are going to all hit all-time highs. Just a quick look at the real estate cycle here, the 18 to 20 year cycle. We are in this commodity boom stage, this huge infrastructure spending, and we're going into this era of very easy money. I've been following this for a very long time, since these lows, and it looks like we're heading into this top here, 2025, 2026, roughly speaking, for real estate, and real estate has been up around the world. So this is all coming together for that. So now that we can see there's a lot of money floating around and coming into the markets just based on looking at the charts, prices going up, breaking significant levels, I suspect Bitcoin will also follow suit. Now, I've got tons of other charts to get through, but I won't do those today because the video will go too long. Just looking at connections and other correlations with the stock market and Bitcoin. But essentially, this is just something clean and simple. I'm just looking at here with time counts, just so viewers can get an idea of where I think we're at in the bull cycle, cycle day count and bull market phases. Looking at roughly 35 months up, 36 months up, call it 3 years. We are about 13 months into that now. So essentially a third of the way through this particular cycle. Now, this is not the 4-year cycle, the halving cycle that everyone likes to refer to, saying that when Bitcoin hits the halving, that it must go to a new all-time high. I don't think that's right. I think the collapse cycle that Bob is talking about, I think that comes after this one here, which also lines up with the real estate cycle.
Your view is that that collapse will come a few years later.
Correct. Okay, so that gives us where we sit with Bitcoin. In terms of our price targets, we've hit our 50% level just recently, which is something that, like you were looking around 40K. I was again using my 50% level here at 42,200. And I think we talked about this back in June, July, which was way back here when Bitcoin was still going through its reaccumulation. And I'm looking at 50% hit, and it's done it now. So that's where we're at. What comes next? Well, my levels line up similar with some of the levels you're looking at with your extensions here in terms of my next target, which is the monthly swing top. So that's what this yellow line is here. This is a Gann swing indicator, and that is a extreme key level, just like the March low is. You can see it's the higher low out of the cycle low, and this one here in March of 2022 was the first lower swing top, and that was pretty extreme bullishness. There was a Bitcoin conference in Miami. You had all those big guys up on stage, Peter Thiel talking about how Bitcoin's going to go to 300,000. Meanwhile, in the background, he's sold out of all of his crypto and Bitcoin. And, we know what comes next now, 1, 2, 3 massive months down. And so that was an extreme period. And I think the market's got a little bit, it could have some room to move to that 48K level, which, I love when I see these, all roads lead to Rome. Your analysis lines up with this analysis, looking at roughly that 48K level if we can get there. And then I think we potentially have a bit of a pullback leading into that halving before it starts to move again, which is kind of similar to what's happened in the past. At least the last 2 cycles, Bitcoin has rallied up to the 50% level, pulled back just before the halving, and then it's taken 22 months from the cycle low to finally break out of the 50% level and go on that massive bull market. There is your cycle low of 2018. You've got the halving. So we had a rally to the 50%, a pullback, a test of the 50%, and then we finally broke out 22 months exactly again after the cycle low. 22 months after this cycle low leads us to roughly Q3 of 2024. I suspect if history is to repeat, we might get a similar play here where that would be the time that triggers that bull market mania. So I've got 2 major things here. The first one is we are looking at some sort of resistance between 42 and 48K, just based on monthly swing tops and our
Yeah.
50% level. That could lead us this month or next month. Then we start to have a bit of a pullback, February, March. March has been extremely good times for markets to make bottoms. It's a fantastic turning point. You've even got some tops here, but essentially significant turns. And then the halving is April. So maybe it starts to climb into April, test that 50% again, maybe go sideways. Maybe we leave the 50% level earlier than previous cycles, and we can get onto that bit of a mania up to the next price targets in the second half of 2024. But I think this first half of 2024 coming up, 42, 48K level is a key, and then a pullback and see how the market progresses from that halving. 22 months from the cycle low is a key time frame I'm watching. And for all the viewers, that's roughly around Q3 of 2024 for the start of the old retail bull market mania.
So you're still in a camp of, you're in the bullish camp in 2024 for all-time highs by the end of 2024, so I think.
For Bitcoin, yes.
View?
Yeah, for the stock markets, I think they'll hit stock markets, S&P, Dow Jones, NASDAQ. I think they'll hit or at least touch a new all-time high price in the first half of 2024. We've already seen new all-time high prices on emerging markets. India's gone to a massive new all-time high. The Euro 50 is, I think it's 2% away from a new all-time high. I think the US is just a few steps behind there.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I want to see how Bitcoin reacts to those resistance levels you have on the chart. That swing top merges with the golden ratio 61.8%.
I think it does, yes.
I'm not mistaken.
You had a 48K on your chart and a 50K, so somewhere around that gap.
Yeah, so that 48, 50K is going to be a cluster of resistances. All right, thank you very much, Jason. That was really interesting. Again, always fascinating to look at your charts and also your analysis. And by the way, guys, do go ahead and check out Jason's channel on YouTube. I'll put the link for you guys in the description. Go ahead and subscribe to his videos. Definitely check him out. Fascinating to watch. And what I like about you, Jason, is that you always have some angle to talk about on Bitcoin and the market. I want to wish your viewers and our viewers, Jason, a fantastic Christmas. So to all our viewers on YouTube, have a Merry Christmas.
But thank you, everyone, and thanks very much, Alessio, for having me on again. I'm excited to see how these markets play out.
Thanks, Jason. Cheers.